Взгляд со стороны поставщиков, собственно, услуг мы представим со стороны компании Positive, лаборатории Касперского и Solar Security. Собственно, это мы вот втроем.
There are three of us, and we have a surprise for ourselves and for you. We didn't have a separate announcement. We have invited representatives of clients, those who, according to our opinion, have to use our services to criticize possibly everything that we're going to tell you and to give their own ideas about this conversation. So I'd like to give the floor to Benjamin Liftsov, and he will discuss those topics that we wanted to discuss at this particular discussion. Thanks, Alexei. I would like to begin. First of all, I would like to say that it's like impromptu. We three of us decided to make this topic of service-based approach in information security industry, this technical conference. We decided to talk about it. So right now we'll discuss topics which are most business-oriented topics. What are the main advantages for the business, the service approach, and how does it make way to the business? And most of you are technologically educated people, so I think some technological details will be verbalized. And I want from my side to give a certain background for this discussion, and I hope that our respected clients will find some interesting questions for themselves. And alongside with my presentation, or maybe after my presentation, they will speak up on those positions which are interesting to all of us. Dear colleagues, it's kind of a joint meeting. I would like to ask you all to introduce yourselves and say a couple of words about who do you represent, the name of the company, your name, position. Okay. Naumov Maxim, STS Media. Roman Popov, on Russia, IT Security Department. Denis Kamzeev, the head of information security in the Raiffeisen Bank. Pshumsky Lev, the head of information security in Svyaznoy. Dmitry Ivananikov, the head of information security as FSB. Romanov Kirill Olegovich, the head of information security in Federal Customs Services. Nazarov Pavel, MTS Bank. As you can see, we have public sphere and businesses. Thank you very much. I would like to speak about general things, and then if you have any desire to add something to this, speak up. So what I would like to tell you in the beginning. Well, this is some kind of a common place for such discussions, and at a given moment of time, typical threats and vulnerable and malicious software which is being sent to many potential companies, it's not the main problem. I will speak about big problems for big organizations. The main problem are attacks which are dedicated for this particular organization with the peculiarities of its infrastructure, with good understanding of its business processes, etc., etc. And by the way, everybody understands that the widest assortment of means is used in the framework of this particular activity. So this is not just one program which was prepared and sent out, but we're speaking about social engineering within which framework relations are built with employees of the companies. Their accounts are being broken, their computers are being violated and infected. So the tool set is so big that it is hard to say which product can discover the attack vector. So in reality, it's a chain of events, sequence of events, and it's hard to say that it's a targeted attack. You can say only by some overview from above using various tools. And I will share with some general popular ideas and some observations that I've heard in one Western conference. They simply have explained on the example of breaking into the apartment what is the difference between typical malware an addressed attack against specific company. Typical attack. Person moves from floor to floor and kicks doors. Some door opens, he enters and steals something. How can you protect from that? To install a firewall, simple lock. And don't let him enter the main door. Close the main door with the lock. Let's imagine that this person prepares a complex attack against specific apartment, understanding that they have a special safe with certain material valuables in it. And he wants to break in by finding a key. So he needs to steal a key from the bag, then he makes a copy from this key, then he returns it, or maybe some other mechanisms will be utilized. So basically speaking, each action is not disclosing the total intent behind it. So how can you fight against it? It's a big question. And how modern company is ready to spend budgets and resources for this and teach their employees. To our point of view right now, it's not possible, I think. So briefly, well, we go to the second topic: resources and qualification of your employees. Maybe our respected clients can add something to the first topic, technological aspect of it. Because right now, this is the most important topic. Attacks are not typical anymore. And against addressed attack, there is no universal tool. Can you give a comment to that from your side and maybe disagree with it or maybe agree? Well, dear colleagues, who wants to argue or who wants to agree? Well, first of all, it is difficult to be the first one, but nevertheless I would like to speak. Right now we're speaking about something difficult. It's difficult to be against targeted attacks, but I would like to correct the direction of the current discussion by saying that if you look through the prism of information protection is a complex of technical and technical being on the last place measures. So let's pay attention to two first points: legal and administrative, and then our objective or meeting the level of protection of information resources will be provided in a much simpler way, because there's a big spectrum of tools and sometimes we forget about them somehow. Okay, do you want to add something to that? Well, let's think about that. If everything will go into technical realization, then we will lose our discussion somehow. Well, this is service specifics, because we came so happy to speak about defense and ICT, but right now we speak about legal framework. Okay, let's speak about legal framework. I did hear you. Let's move on. Well, let's go back to this statement a little bit later, but to my point of view, whatever are regulations, however well-educated personnel you have, how precisely you follow IT security policies without technical means of control, it's impossible to work. And we have to all agree to that. Undoubtedly, it is obvious that if you don't fix your own processes, introduction of technical means will not help you. Okay, let's move on. And I will try to quickly go through the main statements, through the main ideas, and listen to you, dear colleagues, as well. As we can see in real life, to discover a fact of targeted attack, experts who work in companies, they should have very serious special knowledge, skill sets. Unfortunately, universal experts which work in most of the companies, they don't have sufficient knowledge in some narrow fields. let's say, my observation comes to the fact that for companies, IT security department, for many companies, it's a necessary expense part. For integrators and consultants, this is the most important project resource which allows them to make money. So here's the conclusion. Any trained expert, as soon as his value on the market grows, starts looking at this market, and very often he moves to the position where he is paid more. So how can we hold these expensive specialists into whom a company have invested serious resources? How to keep the retention of these specialists? It's not clear. And if we're speaking about the activities of this expert for on the level of system integrator, we constantly see a lot of number of projects. We constantly see new challenges. Dynamics of their activities are much higher, and it's more interesting for the specialists. So in this case, they are not getting bored. But within one single company, they feel bored. The second conclusion is that we see more and more of knowledge concentration moves to the ISP, to IT security integrators, who can invest in those specialists and they can share them between projects of different clients. I think this is yet another trend, and if you, colleagues, can add something to what I've said, I would ask you kindly speak about that. Well, I would like to make emphasis that we're speaking right now about integrator. They have a more dynamic work and they participate in a bigger number of projects, but they participate in bigger number of projects. This is a fact. They have a project part when we introduce some innovation, we build new process in the company, and also the process work is also bigger. And people who work with integrator, they have a cuckoo bird syndrome, as I call it. They lay egg in some place and then they forget about this egg, and they don't know how to live with this egg in the future. So that's why we see how clients have a big gap in competencies. Integrators do something for us, but nobody knows what to do next with what they do. So we have to teach a totally different internal competency on how to work with this process that they offer to us. So people who work in-house, who work inside of the companies, by the level of their competencies, they are different. Maybe they are not so fast and dynamic in new projects, but they do a totally different job from the point of view of further support, and they are more result-oriented. Yes, very often we do feel this difference in process and project-oriented approaches. We face it. And I can say that both for integrators and vendors, it is important to be able to hold those people with deep competencies who don't suffer from this syndrome. So in our case, we do work with those services because we want to see the process of exploitation of our devices from the beginning to the end. We want to be deep into the problems of our client. We want to understand how our solutions are being used. And this is a good idea and good thinking. Those companies and those vendors who are present here, they don't suffer from this problem, I think, very expressly. But those who forget about it, that if you lay an egg, it doesn't mean that you build a bird. So many of them are falling away, and there will be an exit, or they will be they will leave the expert community and go into more logistical companies. Well, we see that in the course of the last several decades, and we don't see significant changes. Okay. Dear colleagues, I would divide this topic of integration and services. These are services from different categories. Integration, it's some kind of a project with a certain result. Service is a process. And integration, well, if you will look at some specific competencies, of course, client can educate those people within a company much easier because internal specialist knows the internal situation much better. But from the point of view of service, if you look at it, service could be built on the side of third-party organization because it's much easier to support it. The company should have a lot of resources for that. Service or security operation center supported from within client's office. We could not allow that to ourselves. I was an integrator and became ISP. Integrational approach. It's a very heavy topic. When we built JSOC, we had to switch our thinking because to move from project oriented with deadlines to live inside of a client, well, it's a totally big quest. Speaking about my current team, 60% of people are people who came from the clients. Previously, they've been working for the clients, working for the infrastructure, and they lived that style of life and the project-oriented life. I would change into a totally different direction, especially when we speak about big company with big information security department, and they have some division. There are people who solve simple tasks. This is a must audience, most services. Sometimes it's servicing to firewalls or basic incident analysis, and they also have a second and third lines, and in any line they have their own problem when it happens inside of the client. From our experience, the first line are the people who can quickly get tired at the work and burn out, or they quickly grow, and then the model is following, or you have to increase their salary and you have to promote them, but of course you have to replace them, or they leave to another company. Attrition rate on the first line, not in our company but in the market, is in a level of 40%. What it tells us? It tells us that when specialists should leave and new specialists should come, you have to painlessly introduce new employee, and in a month or two you have to teach him. He should be sucked with the processes. He should understand all the tools and would be able to replace the guy who left. It took us a year and a half to build this process. To build it inside of the corporate client, well, this is something that can be solved, but it's not easy. It's not a profile business. This is not type of people that can be easily trained. But speaking about experts, the situation is much more interesting because it's difficult to hold forensic specialists inside of the company. Some companies can do that, some companies cannot do that. And if WAF or CM specialist, if you want to hold them, well, he will know this topic very specifically, but can you give him full-time load within one infrastructure on his level of expertise? Well, it's going to be very difficult to do that. So there's going to be a fork. Either he will do simple topics and will dequalify himself and lose qualification, or he will start doing something in addition which also does not comply to his level of salary and his expertise. Therefore, from this point of view, service provider can become a natural assistant. So expert will get expert opinions, expert objectives, and he will stay inside of the company by providing the client with a constant level of quality of services. On the other side, quickly and painlessly, we can replace the first line of people who quickly rotate. And from this point of view, we don't have additional costs on the client. And all the clients, they understand what it was a human hour and how much it costs in pure money. By finding those people, training those people, well, if we'll generalize this point, it will look the following way. The company was buying through the vendor a product, was transferring it to exploitation service, and this internal department was providing internal services to the company on how to use that particular product to solve some particular objectives in the company. Right now, number of those products and complexity of objectives which the company has becomes such that this particular department should be a very big for many companies to be able to support them and to be able to keep the necessary level of competencies. So what do we find? We find that very organically market moves to the model where on two spectrums of these pictures, primitive services should be transferred on a call center level, and very complex expert-oriented services when you need only big specialists. Maybe this company will never use this specialist's needs, and it's economically unfeasible to hold this specialist within the company. So we go to this interesting distribution of areas where the transfer of certain objectives to third parties, to outsourcing, becomes justified. And perhaps in a given case, we can go to the next slide. The main idea that you will see on this slide, it's in the middle quadrant. Product, it's a certain tool. No matter what you think about it. And service is how the problem is being solved. So in my commercial practices, my project practices, I constantly face in different continents, especially from new clients, when we have a first contact with them, we say, well, we know that you have a good product, but can you provide some interesting service to us? Honestly speaking, they mean the following. If you look at this idea and this phrase, if you translate it into the language, in a proper language, don't sell us some hardware, but solve our problem on a turnkey. So as I understand, that business model around which services are built, your services and everything that we do, well, they all are about this. They don't try just to sell some tool to a client, but they are trying to understand their problem, to understand the effective solution, and with their own efforts try to solve it on a turnkey basis. Dear colleagues, your comments. Colleagues, I see no problems in organizing service approach inside of the company without exaggeration, without introducing outsourcing. Well, you've been speaking about beautiful picture about attracting experts from the side of difficult projects, but in order to interest such an expert, he should be full-time submerged, but he wouldn't have objectives within this company, so he will work on several parallel projects, and his understanding of the topic of specific company will become worse and worse with time, so his efficiency will drop as well, like efficiency of the service in general. So the expertise, let's specify the circle of companies for which the external outsourcing will be useful and interesting. These are mostly SMB, small medium business, then enterprise. Well, it's a question about distribution services on a lower level. This is SMB, but SMB will not be able to pay, because when I've been talking to SME about services providing, a company with 50 people, and I've tried to understand what about security. They say, well, everything's all right with security. Our mail is on Gmail. They do event business. It's very secure. We don't care. Well, backupping on Gmail, mail server on Gmail, computers. Everybody have their own computers. What security you're speaking about? This is typical SMB plus minus. What services are you speaking about? That's what I'm speaking about. For the SMB, information security as outsourcing can be accessible, but bigger enterprise companies, for them it's a less interesting option. Let me argue with you. Can you agree to have forensic team? What, it makes sense to hold it in-house? I'm speaking about good, well, it's a specialist. For some specific topics, yes. This is a living process, especially if we speak about the first line in defense for the same incident processing. Yes, from the economical point of view, the first line can be outsourced and filtered, and the second and third lines can be held within your own competencies. It's a civil economy. Everything that we're speaking about to achieve costs on the rotation of your employees. That's what our colleagues were speaking about. If we're speaking about some complex things, then these are arguable questions and we can discuss them later. But forensics, these are first line specialists. They can be outsourced and it's going to be more expedient, especially for big companies. For SME segment, well, this could be one-time activity and they're not interested in this as a constant service. Maybe we should look at it from totally different angle of understanding as a service to the client. Why forensics is a good client? It's a good sample. You send it somewhere. They give you very clear report. What is a pen test? Previously it was not clear. Right now everybody understands what is a pen test, and they even understand external and internal pen testing with full submerge, not full submerge. But the problem is not about simplicity and complexity and holding and not holding these specialists inside of your company. But the question is more about how this service can be consumed. Well, it starts here, it ends here, it costs you that much, scalability options are such. You have this problem, you don't have this problem, everything's understandable about these services. Do you have any ideas? Well, if you don't participate in discussion, please participate. Dear colleagues, please don't forget that integrators and service providers who will provide these services, they will face the same problems with attrition rate. Well, these are profiled organizations which have processes to fight with these problems. So, dear problem, we have specialists from solar. They're speaking about the topic of burnout of the employees, so it wouldn't become the problem for the company. So they take away this problem. Well, I would like to respond, especially about experts who should full-time work for the client. In our case, when we speak about experts, there are two types of experts, and they work about 30% of time for the client. One analytic could work for 3 clients, but how deeply he goes into the topics of our clients. But from the point of view of rotation of employees, well, in the first line it's very high, but on the expert level, only 2 people have left from our company. But the model, when from client to client you work, because 2 people work, 2 people in context, one more technical, one more managerial. This is a good approach. And this is not a simple objective, but it is process oriented. And many clients do have here. Maybe some of you uses those services, because we've heard 2 feedbacks that these services could be interesting or not interesting. So can we hear something positive? I hope. Okay, I would like to say that I'm the follower of MSSP, and even in the enterprise segment, I will step back. No matter what team you have inside of your company, their expertise will be much lower than that of external team, because internally these people work with the same process every day, with the same infrastructure every day. Their eyes are getting dull and they don't see everything which happens in the external network. But if we speak about ED, the speed is very important to us, and maybe some fast changes, especially when we speak about this monitoring. The external team seeing the 10 clients operation can save you before something bad will reach you. That's why it's a definite advantage of external specialists. But very often in Russia we face a problem, and everybody speak about it, not for the first year. 5-6 years I'm walking around the market and I'm asking, can you sell me a service? And vendors and integrators, they say, well, of course we can sell it. We'll make a wonderful service for you. Tell us what you want. I said, I don't want to tell you what I want and how to do it. I'm not an expert. You're experts. Sell me a service which can be copied and teach me how to properly use it. Correct me if I'm wrong. And we have only few offers like that in the market in the West. A subscription model is very popular in the West. When you get a certain fixed, simple product, a service where nothing can be changed. But you don't have to change, because it's a tuned up process and it will be result oriented. No matter what you think, companies are different, they have different infrastructures, but viruses and protocols are the same. And everybody are trying to defend themselves from the same problems. So the main problem that in Russia it's not a common thing, MSSP outsource, is the absence of offer of typical copied services in the area of IT security. And the question is, why? Why don't you do that? I think that we are moving in this direction, maybe not as fast as we wish to, but the offer and supply are very well interrelated, because to my point of view, we still have the main problem ahead of us, those trust thresholds behind which organization can launch another organization, integrator, MSSP, consultant. So in order for these borders to be moved and shifted, it took us many years, and only now in Russia or in many other countries we see a circle of consultants who are being trusted. And if this consultant has a special account manager for this client, all the way that they've made a contract with that particular person about NDA, so he's known, he communicates to the client, and he receives the highest volume of information, which some people even inside of the company don't really know. So when we speak about some incident investigation services, the highest volume of information is kept by protected organization, and this so-called forensic server, where the external connection is being connected to, managed, and is being supervised by protocol. There are certain rules according to which they should open this data. Also, with the same consultant, we have a multi-year cooperation, and her activity are ensured. So this is the situation in which we live, in which we get certain image of consultant we trust, and on step-by-step basis we start transferring to him for execution more and more complex objectives in the internal information security. So I think that the level of trust will grow, then we'll see the number of those contracts growing, and of course service offer as well. So what do you think about that? I would like to add to a previous speaker about transferring everything to the outsourcing. First of all, I don't support this idea, and I will explain you why. We're speaking about very general things. There are problems, HR problems, problems with people. So we always say that everything has to be outsourced, but nevertheless, as a representative of a company which provides security operations center services, you perhaps work with a certain outsourcing model. You, inside of your company, for the client, you determine which processes, which services can be feasibly utilized, including economical efficiency, which one of them can be outsourced and which ones of them should be held internally. And I am confident that there are services which today it makes no sense to outsource. As an example, I can show you reacting to attacks inside of big corporation. The word reaction we didn't hear, but it's surprising, because one of the main objectives of security team is the possibility to quickly react to any vector of attack. So if we do monitor which can be outsourced, which should be held internally, so our further investigations of our internal infrastructure of the company, well, it's a very specific expertise which has to be inside of a company, not outside. Well, this is my opinion. This is my private opinion. So my question is about model that I was speaking about. Perhaps you also do have those model services which can be outsourced, for which you already have successful practices, and something that will never be outsourced. I would like to hear about that as well. Okay. Can I add a couple of words? Thank you very much for the offer. I don't offer to outsource everything, of course. Safely, you determine the level of trust, and you could divide that monitoring is being outsourced and recommendations for reaction should be outsourced. But this team can be educated about internal products without sensitive data, of course. And then you get professional recommendations which add to this expertise. And reaction, of course, should be done by some internal team. And then the next step, as with ITSM implementation, the first process is introduced by everybody and then 10%. So the next step is a small volume of work. But then vendors will come and integrators will come and they will offer scalable, proper models of their services. Okay, I would like to say on behalf of service providers from the point of view of what is being outsourced, what is not being outsourced to us. Well, I can make a very simple example. In the last 4.5 years, I've seen 2 requests. Clients have asked us to take DLP for the service as the exploitation service and as a process and as a personal information leak. The reason was very simple. From the point of view of Russian legislation, is a commercial banking secret and nobody has a right to get access to it. But this context of organization is much more simpler and much more better. So I've seen a certain picture on the screen. It should be our vision and how the clients are welded internally. When we speak about the lower level, like security maintenance level, the exploitation of IT security system, according to a number of regulatory systems, can be outsourced. Processes of providing information security in the company is a totally different situation. Information security is a responsibility of the company itself. Speaking about reacting to incidents, it's a very complex process. It has to be looked piece by piece. There's a fact of discovery. This could be through monitoring from information from the external sources. It could be information from the security software. This is outsourced. But when we speak about incident reaction, you should understand which reactions should speak about. For example, if it's a callback from a certain station that can be blocked on the firewall, well, good model would do that, and we look at the client from this point of view. But when the accident is happening, we see certain anomalies in operations. Of course, it's a joint work, and we can do certain technical analysis, and technical data could be at the input, but making decision about what employee should do, what business process and what business system will do, then we have a common statement of incident reaction. It includes not only service provider specialists but also client specialists. It's an integral work that should be done together. But when we speak about forensics and investigating the incident, there are technical investigations like collecting logs, forensic analysis, reverse analysis, etc. This topic can be done together with service provider analysis. But when we speak about information leak investigation and investigation of the employees by technical means, no service provider will solve it. This information will stay inside of the company, and service provider will never take a function of management. The decision making in choosing the strategy is in the hands of the client, and only client can solve it. Service provider can come with his own vision of trends on the basis of incidents, on the basis of understanding the external world, on the basis of understanding the external provider. But how this is done and what is to be done, it's a problem of the client. So what should be given and what shouldn't be given, this is our vision. Everything that could be terminated and divided into technical steps, it's a topic for discussion. But when we're speaking about things which are deeply submerged in the company or related to employees' personal data, another model of cooperation, then service provider is not needed. Service provider. Well, and I would like to add another topic. There was an idea that out-of-box services, scalable services. Out-of-box services is a good idea, a good model, a proper model, and we do see in the West a growing topic with MSSP. Everybody is filled with SSPs of different levels, but possibly we have a dual side problem from the side of those who provide or non-provide those services, and from the side of those who consume those services. So this idea and readiness to consume box services, well, this idea should be on the side of the client, because what we see today, especially when we try to do maximally typical service, when we try to offer it, we immediately receive from 10 different clients 10 different proposals from some respect on their side to do it a little bit differently, as they say. Can you apply correction here and here, or you do something wrong, guys, they say. So from this point of view, there's a certain dilution of this cloud service. So don't you have any questions to me? Don't you have a feeling that market is ready to consume services in this option of such a proposal? We had a discussion about mentality, about SLA in Russia and outside of Russia. And we've been discussing how this topic is well respected or no respected. Can I? Well, I come to the store and I like when milk stores 1013 grams. Yes, they can perhaps sell it to us, but it will be much more expensive. And in a given case, I don't buy milk, but a very complex technological service. I come and I want to buy a very difficult and complex equipment, and I say, can you install additional transistors? You are expert and you can say that this is technologically balanced service. If you want a ribbon, we can apply it for additional money, and this will be a stimulus for achieving accountability and repetitiveness, because you started the first ones. I come to the vendor and I say, I want to copy. Well, I want to protect perimeter, for example. The real story. Several years ago, I've been asking my vendors, and they say, yes, of course, we'll do it for you. We collect our hardware, throw it away, take our hardware, and we'll give you the infrastructural protection. But I have wonderful hardware, beautiful hardware. They say, well, it's not effective, it's not interesting to us. So there should be... Well, vendors wants to sell their own box. Thank you. Colleagues, I have another small aspect. Everybody have forgot about that, but we all live in Russia. We have strictly regulated activities in the sphere of procurement, and especially when we speak about public procurements for public companies. So let's divide the topic into two subtopics. First one related to work execution, another to service provisioning. What is a service from the point of view of legislation? A service is a set of events which are done, and the result of their execution is execution. Work is creating something valuable which is put in a balance, you justify money, etc., etc. An example of DLP system 2-up, a content filtration database, investigation of incidents within certain forensics. It comes to a product, then it's put to the balance, and this is done within framework of work execution. But speaking about service provisioning, we see a big set of problems which never were solved yet. Distribution of accountability, he should do what? Then second one, how the results are received in the framework of service. I think that we should talk about this topic as well. Plus terms multi-year support, they're not within contract criteria, and you should understand that this will be pulling from one to another and damping from other companies. So I would like to hear your comments. Colleagues, I would like to speak about the trust to service providers. The service level is based on the reputation in the market, and there are no formal criteria that anybody could offer. Service providers in the market, there are only few of them. So maybe a certain formal criteria will be developed, some standards about trust level to the MSSP. Dear colleagues, I have another comment about trust. Trust is a Russian-based service. When idea with a certain person were not looking at how the work will be organized and how the server will be organized, but who will be responsible when everything will become bad, who will be punished. And this is not really a service-based approach, but we should take this person inside of the company and then punish him for every violation. But what people will be responsible with? Because sometimes, well, our systems are more than billion rubles. Well, it's an interesting question. Who will pay for it? And here's a topic that we started discussion about applicability and non-applicability of the services. It's about big company, enterprise system, SMB. Well, it consists of different sides. We're speaking about internal organization of a team. So if inside of a team you have good order, then business processes were well built, and that's much easier to give something for the services because you understand which business process with which assets, which information is being processed. But it's much more difficult to launch service within an enterprise corporation. Yes, of course it's much difficult because enterprise is bigger and more complex, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's only for enterprise or for SMB. I think this service will speak about the maturity level of a company. Is it mature for the services enough? Is it ready to consume this service or not? If you have problems inside, then you're not ready. Making a resume from everything said above, we had a slide about the problems of these services, and it said that client cannot consume services. And making resume from what colleagues said, please don't offer things that you integrators are not ready. We believe, but you don't offer. We believe you, but you don't offer us. Colleagues, I would like to add to this. There are no criteria according to which we could determine whether we can consume it or not. And perhaps it was not in vain when I've been speaking about three directions. This problem of purchasing services by big clients. It makes sense to think about defining criteria and defining responsibilities, the legal base. Only after that, these services will be more clear and understandable, and somehow you will be able to consume them. We speak about services, service approach, and process follow-up services. But during previous slides, we've seen that products and problem solving. For example, there's a product, we have implemented it, but what's next? How can it be followed and which processes should be used? So if we want to work with a certain process, you want to provide support within a process inside of the organization and not just simply introduce a product and forget about it. Well, product and a product solution, it's a marketing. It never happens that you have a certain service that will solve all your problems. It's easy to begin with a service because they have a certain service model and you can tune yourself up for this model. But I don't believe that there are some miraculous service that will immediately launch my SOC and everything will be wonderful. Well, it takes work, big internal work first of all. What about forensics then? For example, you had an incident, you were not ready for it. You call a team of specialists, they do internal forensics investigation and give you certain results without you going in depth of your internal processes, etc., etc. It's one-time campaign, they've done it, gave you results. You gave these results to the law enforcement agency and they left. Is it against my words? Well, there is no in-depth go into the processes. In-depth thinking of the processes is done to the employees of this company who organized this working group, and they started being providers because people from outside cannot come and do the forensic services about nothing. Well, but this can be consumed from third-party organizations. Yes, we have different levels of services. We already have agreed to that. Ain't we? It's not different level of services. There are process services and project services. Forensics is a project service, one-time service. Okay, I'll agree. It's a project service. And about outsourcing, dear colleagues on the market, we see a lot of examples, both among banks like Sberbank and big Sberbank. Sberbank is an outsourcing for Sberbank. Lukoil, it's a Lukoil form. In outsourcing terminology, it's called insourcing. It's not a copied service, it's a service provided to a specific client by a specific specialist. It's in a connection point. Let's go back to the question that nothing is regulated and you don't trust. Let's discuss on this topic. Let's begin by dividing the accountability. Any outsourcing begins with SLA. In IT world, outsourcing company is being measured by the number of pages in the service provisioning page. One has 100, another has 150, and another one has 200. 200 means everything described, responsibility for who does what, every incident solution, penalties. All this is defined in these agreements. Our service contracts, they don't reach 150 pages, but still they have a lot of materials. Some of them I've seen. Perhaps you understand what I'm speaking about. So if we speak about regulation in the legal field, yeah, there should be agreement, there should be a contract, and the contract could be a basis for further discussion. Which conditions were fired, which conditions we live in together. And if we say, let's look at the choice criteria, well, nothing is different from classical integration model. There is certification when we say that the company has to be a service provider and should provide you with certain security services. They should know about your internal security. For example, there's a lot of banks and they should be certified that they can provide those services. And on the incident level, if we go to the area, should he be entrusted or should not? There's a lot of reasons. There's a person, and we see nothing better than a good specialist. But there are references, there are clients you can go to and get confirmation from them. I use that. I use that all the time. And I can tell you in your head, there were 3 incidents that were able to clear this problem and situation by, to my point of view, visual characteristics are difficult to be transferred. Some people who used, who look like you, and they provide services, and everybody's happy with those services. But what can be embedded in the legal field, I don't know. Perhaps on the Western market, there is a fashionable topic, assessment of a SOC readiness. If it is interesting to you, we are ready, 3 of us, to give certifications to service providers. One will have 4.5, another will 3, another will say 5.75. Will we have trust after this or not? Well, it's not about passing some certifications to comply to certain requirements, but there are no requirements without which you should go to any certification. And in the framework of state procurement legislation, we can require so that definitely it would be defined in a state legislation or normative regulations of the executive authorities. But if we'll say that our friend liked it there and 3 more incidents will require some more certification, then we'll receive problems with FAS and then Article 86 and Critical Code of Russian Federation. That's what I mean by that. So there is no legislative criteria to be able to measure the thickness of paper boxes. Well, it's not always effective to do that. But there are 2 moments here. The first moment that Vladimir started telling you, the critical mass of people who've been using it, did they like it? If there's only 1, 2 people like that, if you have 20% more of those people, at least every 5th of them uses it. And the second topic is that this legislation, according to which it will come or maybe will not come, it's important and good for us, but in principle, how can you do that? Well, I will make an example with safe development document. We've been speaking about it, and suddenly some ghost standard was introduced, and we understand how it should be done. Same story will happen here. The time for becoming mature will pass. You have long days, as I understand. We are not SOCs. Well, perhaps it's time for me to finish. Forgive me, but I will speak about scalable services. Before service will become scalable, you will not have this necessarily 20% of people who use it and trust it. because right now we cannot say that in that company they have similar services and everything works. No, the service is not like that, and the fact that they have changed their contract so many times means nothing, and it's a problem. But when you will have a typical one, like Osago, Costco, or other ones, then it will be possible. This company pays well, and this company doesn't pay well, and the trust will be there. And in this sense, Costco is a good example, and Osago is an effect of regulation work. So from this point of view, you assume that we among ourselves we can agree between the colleagues, and colleagues they do it real practical steps. They collect a forum, and then community gathers together, and we're trying to work on this. But in principle, I do agree with your idea, and the agreement should be typical, and the solution should be within the framework of one company, and we among ourselves we should agree that incidents should be reacted, then investigation should be initiated, and then everybody understand the same thing under these processes. But it's related to the topic of standardization, which terminology we accept for each of these words, where the beginning, where the end, what is part, what is not part of it, because our marketable mechanisms of cost optimization and everything that you said about for some people Costco pays, for some people Costco doesn't pay. It's a dual side market. We shouldn't go too deeply into this situation. We may not speak about competition between one service and another for different companies, but competition between unique services and typical services in different companies. And when typical service will win, then standard will come to appearance. Then a standard will be developed. To have a typical service, we need MSSP market, which Roman is waiting for, because on the contrary, one company can say we have typical SLAs, and from client to client we have 15, 17 options of service provisioning, and we provide 4 to 5 of them, and almost all the clients use the same service, which is a typical one. We have those small things which don't influence the main SLA. We have 3 types of SLAs. We have the same set of services which are provided to the client. Yes, if the client wants something in addition, yes, we can do it. We can provide it to them. But the main problem is not in providing typical and non-typical services, but what's important that everybody should provide same set of services. And for this we should have market. For this we should have 7, 8, 10 MSSPs who will come, who will arrive to this standard, and you will lead them to this standard. They will come by agreeing between themselves, and that's the only way how this market can be developed. And from my side, I would like to add, Kaspersky Lab that I represent, MSSP services are not provided by us, but everything that we do is a tool set which allows MSSP to provide their services better on a higher level. That one I can say we make more powerful, more well-prepared teams who provide services to SOCs, MSSP teams by providing them with our knowledge, access to some of our informational sources, our tools, our frameworks, and our experts. Usually to work on the second line with complex cases. And on the basis of this, for example, in order for you to better understand, global service of analysis of malicious code. If a company in their office faces some complex sample, they don't understand where it came from and what should be done with it, and standard products are not available for that, then they invite lab experts, they investigate this particular sample, they provide a report on this sample on a format that was agreed in the preliminary agreed deadlines in hours, and possibly consultancy if some questions are left. This is some small service that we provide to big Western clients. There are other ones, but what I would like to say that services that I'm thinking about, there are little bricks of more complex services which are provided by the final MSP, for example, the one that Volodya represents. And if in our level we can speak about clear SLA and about standardization, about certainty of results of this service, then on a higher level, the higher is the level, the more difficult is to speak about typization. I may be mistaken. We can speak about guaranteed result. It's understandable that we always have a gray field where you can go deeper, where you can go further, but there is a guarantee that the service should not be lower than this level, and results will not be worse than those we received in other projects. With all these documents, with all these SLAs, with all these agreements, well, it's clear that we always have this gray field, gray area, and if some complex incidents are happening, we together with some partners outside of our framework agreements will start doing that. And this can be done because this incident is available and we should clear it. And sometimes we have cases when together with the agreement, together with the client, we should do some additional work on preparing the audit and setting some security product. And this is something that has to be done. Maybe it was not agreed in the agreement, but we should do it in order to provide high-level services. So service is about some guaranteed result and availability of gray areas and something that will be done in addition. Well, this is on the basis of verbal agreements. Okay. I have a question to the speaker. It was a dialogue between the client and service providers. Are they ready to provide these services? And this dialogue comes to the single point. We want to provide services to you. We'll do everything possible to provide it, but why don't you use our services? So I would like to ask a question to you. What is your opinion? Why client is not ready to use your services? We did hear the opinion of the client, but what do you think about it? Why client is not ready? What is the problem here? Why they're not ready to use services, your services? Why aren't they ready? As I understand, they are. And Roman said that he loves MSSPs and he's interested in this. I will give you the wider answer. I work in this area since 2011. It's not good to speak, but I speak about Russian mindset. For different reasons, I'm being rebuked for that, but nevertheless, you have to understand in your head, security is something internalized, something important and expensive. One of my clients, and he's very important to me, because I've been working with them since 2011, 2012, when the first services, and I've been telling them about that, yes, here it is, you have to use it. They said, yes, no, information security, so what? Never will be outsourced, never, never, he said. The company, technological company, industrial company will never outsource it. And a year ago, we met at the conference, and he said, we will have a budget next year, let's make a pilot, because we are ready for that. What's in the way? What's the problem? I don't think there's a problem here, but the number of clients which are interested in these services, which are ready for these external services, we see more and more of those clients from year to year. Somewhere it's a breakthrough in the mentality. Some of them, they understand that the problem which has to be solved is much wider than objective capabilities of their team. For example, if they have 6 people, but they have to provide security for the whole company and 24/7 mode, well, nobody will sleep, attackers or attacked will not sleep. So in this place, at a certain moment of time, the understanding will come that it's impossible to extinguish this fire alone. You should use a help. For some other people, it will stay as totally different problem. It could be a legal problem, participation in the tender, maybe it could be internal regulation problem, maybe not acceptance of the business topics, but I wouldn't say that clients are not ready. We see more and more clients who are ready, and the problem is disappearing. Dear colleagues, do you have any opinion? It was a question to us. Yes. I would like to hear the opinion of everybody. You know, once again, I represent a company which manufactures software solution and auxiliary services which help to disclose their potential. And I can say that our service resources are not utilized, where periodically we do face situations when, for example, security assessment services that we are providing, they're much higher than a budget on the side of a client. And the client cannot afford them. Some things can be easier to be done internally, but then they lose an aspect that it should be done with external perception. Then there will be more chances that you will solve problems that you cannot see from inside. Well, it's a question of costs and readiness to pay. And 3 years ago there was a situation, it was much more tougher than right now. I'm speaking about the global situation. In other words, competition is very high, even globally. And once again, I constantly face a situation, especially while talking to the clients, I face a great level of interest, great deal of interest of which service you can provide us, they say. And they don't mean by service solving of some specific problem. And by the way, solution offering of the service begins from some minimal investigation of the situation inside of the client together with the client. And usually it is done on a free of charge basis by some pre-sale operations. And on the basis of my personal practices, clients like it because it allows them to clear the situation what they really need. In other words, from my side, I would answer this question in the following way. Five years ago it seemed impossible. Right now it is discussed, and this is wonderful. And we see a sequential solution of all the problems that were delayed in previous years and still are important for the company, like trust. Then we mentioned a problem of risk distribution. Who will take responsibility in case if some service have violated the operation of some internal IT system, risk insurances related to this activity, etc., etc. So on a step-by-step basis, we are progressing in all these directions, and I think that finally, big part of this work in the area of IT security will be transformed into services of external providers, outsourced, because most of you have similar objectives. That's my thinking. It's very surprising to hear that such investigation projects and serious consulting and audit is done on free of charge basis, maybe in the framework of some very big implementation and solution where costs are so high that consulting will be a very insignificant part of this story. It was very surprising for me to hear. Well, and I would like to add to this that all happy people are happy in the same way. But unhappy people are unhappy in their own ways. So the main problems and the main stopper here is a question of misunderstanding those problems that organization will face by creating internally a special department of operational security department, and those expert problems they will face and solve. For example, I will hire a person, he will do everything for me, and he can find one person, he will solve one of all the problems, and all other problems will go unnoticed. And those clients who tried, and those people who worked with incidents, with information security incidents, who tried with their own hands to do these things, they came to the next level of cognition and understanding the problem. And through these several stages, through several steps, they come to a question, well, there is nothing you can offer us. You want to have some specific knowledge of something that is understandable, and this understanding can be aligned or misaligned with you. But in principle, these problems do exist, and those who want, those who can, and those we work with, we have good relations. So why not? And we have a full list of claim management processes. And it depends on the level of maturity, depends on the level of order or disorder inside of the company, how company itself is ready for this, how company is tuned up to solve these problems internally. If the company wants to solve their problems and not to buy another solution from outside, then there will be much more drivers for this work. Well, I will disagree with you from this point of view. The thing is that enterprise segment is ready to spend money for specialists, and they're ready to spend money for tools to organize internal processes. At the same time, when I create inside of my enterprise these processes, or when I do the insourcing for them, as with Lukoil or Sberbank, I understand how these processes are working inside of my company. For me, human resource management is understandable thing. We have internal documents which are accepted internally or are given to the insourcing company. But when you come from outside and offer me some service as a black box, I will come and solve your problems from outside. I will solve your problems for X number of rubles. It's a black box to me. I don't understand that. And here I see a problem of trust related problem to this third party outsourcing company. It's not transparent to me. I don't know. Maybe tomorrow another person will manage my systems. You know, I will disagree with you as well. I had an experience of working as an insourcer, and there was a topic as well that company, insourcing company, the fact that they understand what is being insourced by them, this is also a cloudy. So in some companies it can be possible, but mother company doesn't have this level of specialists and that amount of the specialists to cover all spectrum of problems. Otherwise they wouldn't hold this team. Otherwise they would understand everything about this problem and they would solve it themselves with a certain trust interval. But the second question is about continuous provision of this work. Well, if it's an insourcing company, this company, well, these people will go to the insourcing company and they will do their direct work in this insourcing company, and less people you will have in the mother company to understand how these insourcers are working, and you will have a similar situation like with us. There's one company, a second company, a third company, and nobody knows what the second company does. There's a formal document like in service-related situation. Well, we can argue, but that's the situation. Dear colleagues, several minutes ago when we've been discussing the fact that services provided, they are growing like a snowball. 5 years ago nobody was thinking about it, and right now everybody thinks about, well, I would like to mirror this situation. Don't you think that to receive these services and to understand of what really happens and what is being done with your organization, you should have a separate department of good professionals, or outsource reception of these services? It should be a separate direction that is outside of your cognitive skills. Well, it's a question to you. Are you ready to do that? Well, I do have an answer to this question, and me together with my colleagues, we did have conversations. Well, they're thinking about it, but they will come to a certain common understanding in the interests of the clients. Two independent organizations, they work for each other and they have certain interests. We discuss it and maybe we'll come to a common denominator. But this is a question to you, Alexei. Well, client makes signatures that services were provided in full volume and according to deadlines, and no matter what were the conditions of providing this service, still client is responsible for it with his own name and with his own finances and sometimes with his own freedom. But we should give tool to the client to analyze the quality. It's not a rocket science in every case. This is something that can be solved differently when we speak about something basic, like quality of service provisioning for the firewall. Well, if the firewall fails, everybody will know about that. If the SLA was not fulfilled, this will be seen immediately. But when we speak about the service, more complicated services, the mechanics are even more difficult. But in our practices, together with the client, in addition to the reporting document that we have to provide to them, on the level of trust, there could be some doubts. but we have a number of tools, and the client can create an incident according to the criteria, and then he can figure out that he was caught. And the client can monitor the condition of his infrastructure that we've been serving and understand whether it's available or not. And this is not even for security guys, it's for the IT guys in that place. You know, if you say that it's difficult to control the outsourcer, it's not that difficult. There are tools. And we can say that there's another extremity, especially for our system of public tenders, when 80% or maybe 60% of assessments and offer is based to the price. And this leads to what we have with our roads. Nobody looks at the long period of servicing. Well, if this road will last for 1 year, then in 1 year it will be maintained by another company. Well, the question of control, it always leads us to extremity. Nothing cannot be done. But, the client should be called to responsibility and following the criteria of these services. It should be followed. For example, you have a firewall, that's all right. And you have regularly checked it, you receive a feedback, well, that's all right. But on the other side, it's understandable that did you have any practices that when you have convicted a client that they had a exotic method of getting around the firewall by MSSP socket and it didn't work, and for this client will suffer who signed under something that service was provided in time and in full value. It will not happen. Just as an example. Well, this could happen perhaps, but on the side of the client there always should be an expert who should understand the nature of what happens. But you will agree with me that control takes much less time than execution. So from this point of view, it's effective than when it's done by your own in-sourced services. Well, everything depends, of course, on the client. Dear colleagues, I would like to give a comment and a question. The comment as a person related to providing OB services. Today, we are not speaking about outsourcing, but outstaffing in this area because non-mature and non-ready, well, you have to contact certain people in this area. But the question is more related to providers and to the point of view of responsibility. I've been asking this question previously. Can you tell me, please, how do you distribute responsibility and accountability between incidents? And first of all, I'm interested not in simple by accessibility, but violation of other properties like confidentiality, integrity, where the violation is different to calculate and losses are more difficult to calculate. How it is done for you today, if it is done, and what is the future, especially with the insurance? So what is being done from this point of view today? Well, I would like to give an answer, and then Volodya from ISP will provide you answer. This question is going through the insurance of professional activities globally. It's a very common service, and the insurance is done in different directions. In America, they have models when they insure all risks, incident-related risks, including business reputation. In Europe, more common model is when they cover only costs for removing the consequences of the incidents, and reputational risks or any other business risks are not covered. But generally speaking, to my point of view, beautiful and universal answer to this question is only one: insurance and insurance. When the risks of negative consequences is distributed between the big number of stakeholders of this market, and for each one of them specifically, it's been justified. But as we can see it in practice, in real life, how this is being fought by specific ISP, well, it's from case to case. It's a very philosophical question. When we speak about risks, about the fact of incident happening or not happening, it's a kind of a joint work. And in the case when we come to the client, and client, I don't know, let's make a simple example. He doesn't have his application firewall. We have introduced a very big package of protecting his infrastructure, but without web application firewall, with all the desire, we cannot defend him from web-related attacks. We can invent 10, 20 algorithms which will work around all these processes, but nothing will replace WAF. And if we start defending his infrastructure deeper, we start providing his key services, and we can discover problems without the send paid, but we'll make it a small number of systems. And if the client is a flat network without segmenting and everything is available from everywhere, then without specialized tool sets, we cannot protect them completely. And in the framework of our agreement, we discuss which risks we can cover, which we cannot cover. Therefore, the incident which happen outside of the zone of our control, well, will stay outside of our conversations or clearances. Incident within the zone of our control, well, these are agreement relations, these are penalties which happen within this particular incident and agreement. They are fixed, they are equal to the amount of the agreement. But let's look at it from the other side. How many successful practices did we have on a full-scale assessment of consequences from incident? It's the question from the same field. You know, we can lie to ourselves. We can say that we are ready to discuss amount of penalty for the incident, and then we go into the legal field and nobody will ever agree about actual damage from incident. Because when they have assessed those assets, well, maybe 0.5% of all the companies, and they have not reviewed their assets in the course of the last 2 or 3 years, will come into legal field. You said that it will cost 10 billions. We will say that it costs 300,000, and we'll never agree. Never. And there will never be found a legal leverage to solve this problem. So it's a certain entity which we can speak about when market will become more mature. Maybe some of the clients who consume these services will give us a reply. Yes, I would like to add. When we start conversation about some outsourcing of services, this is a very common topic, especially when we start saying, well, outsourcer is not responsible, he will not cover the damage from incident, and outsourcer always speaks about it. How come we pay you money and you don't carry any responsibility? Let's look at the situation from the other angle. Employees. If we build similar service inside, what responsibility is being carried by the employees of this department? How they will cover incidents which have passed? No way, no way. Same thing here. So when we say that outsourcer can pay some fixed penalties, then in any case we will be in a win-win situation, at least on the principle, you know, from bad sheep, at least some of wool. We will repay, and outsourcer will be more attentive. So from this situation, to speak about the full coverage of some damage that was caused, nobody knows how to completely calculate all those damages. Well, it's not a just situation to pull it to the outsourcer. Another idea should be added, that NSSP is the main business compared to the security department in the company. Therefore, if penalties will be applied regularly, this will bring the NSSP to bankruptcy. So the penalty will not be aimed on repayment of the damage that cannot be assessed, but to destroy and penalize the company who didn't work pretty well. Maybe it's the right thing to do. And in our practice, in our experience, periodically we practice a topic as certain compensating works. In case with pen tests, for example, we can say that. In case if we didn't find something, even though it's a question of angle point of view, maybe something was disconnected or switched off, and some zero-day vulnerability was found, then we can say and can speak about a certain agreement on investigation of this particular incident. So we have a compensatory mechanism which to us, depending on the commercial conditions, will not be less beneficial as incident investigation service within the framework of agreement. And I would like to add a couple of examples which illustrate this problem. Well, penalties for non-execution of certain conditions and service agreements. Well, honestly speaking, as I can see, the simpler, the more atomary services, the more is the foundation to determine certain areas and dimensions of this responsibility. As an example, I can tell you the following. Some years ago, Trimicro had a service of extended service which has included guaranteed addition of sample into the database for a certain amount of hours. And Trimicro have announced guaranteed payments of certain penalties in case if this amount of hours the sample was not added to database and was not delivered to the client. In my practices, there was one case when this penalty was paid, so honestly they did follow the requirements they have formulated themselves, and the client was happy about that. Well, it's understandable that penalty was not big one, but it was a significant stimulation to the whole team to follow the SLA. So when conditions, risks were clearly measurable, vendor or NSP can go for that. And another example that I can make about insurance, because we work with European insurance companies, and I hear a lot of different interesting cases, and one of them is following. Financial institutions, especially big banks, very big banks, they are not insuring them because it's very difficult and almost impossible to realistically assess the top level of damage level, even highest level of the cost of investigation of complex incident for Barclays, for example. Practically impossible. So the less certain is the scope, the higher are the bits, the more difficult is to install some sanction conditions. But for some separate services, yes, they can be determined and defined and connected to the time of work to the failure or some other things. Can I add? It's not really clear, especially this question of repayment of damages and losses. It's not done with NSP providers. And as a client, I would look carefully to an NSP provider who would promise me to repay such damages. There are insurance companies. As I know, in Russia, even today, even last year, we do have ideas and attempts to offer insurance products on insuring risks. Either more complex risks were realization of damage compensation. If this damage was led to by cyber conditions, well, this also is covered. You shouldn't make vendors and integrators, those NSSP providers, to do the business which is not their own business. Let them work on, scalable products. Can you call at least one insurance company which insures IT security risks? No, unfortunately not. I cannot call the one that insures them, but in a recent year, twice I've been talking to insurance companies for the topic of training or preparing such products. Because they are working on those risks in the course of 3 years, but we don't see any insurance company which is ready. None of them came with such product on the market. Well, nothing comes in one day, but nevertheless, let them do that. They will come to this much faster than us providers. And I would like to give a comment about risks. Damage compensation. When a person works inside of my company, I have labor agreement with this person. According to this labor agreement, he can carry administrative responsibility and criminal responsibility, and this motivates a person to fulfill his obligations properly. But when I have agreement with external company, then we have legal relations with them, and not criminal, not administrative responsibility I cannot lay upon them. And when a person hires people to work for them, and usually they hire subcontractor organizations or external outstaffers, it's not a secret that they use resources from foreign companies and from India and other countries. I don't have any guarantee that these people who can potentially damage the company will be held responsible for it. Well, let's see, in a given case, you can speak about penalties, not compensation of damages, but some penalties within the framework of the agreement price. But what will be done with that person who made a mistake internally? Well, that's a question to you. Okay? Honestly speaking, I don't know. On the level of all the video from Microsoft, we share your pain. There was a sterilization. When you send a report, if there will be an error in a product, the software automatically detects the programmer who made an error in a code, and they have those shifts who hit those developers. electrocution or something else. But there are different practices, but nevertheless, we are coming back to the topic of NDA with a person, NDA with an entity, legal entity. And people do receive penalties for that, even in the case if it was not in the framework of our agreement and there was no claim about it, but incident went through our radar. To me, it's a reason to penalize a person in his karma, and then I will deal personally with them. What penalties are you ready to pay on incidents or non-fulfilled SLAs to the clients? Well, equal to the amounts of the agreement, full amount of the agreement. Well, this rating depends on the incidents, on its criticality. Usually, as a rule, we say that 2-3 last incidents of medium criticality, this is next month free of charge. Everything else individually discussed with the client. It's understandable. SLAs are different, incidents are different, everything is different. But when we speak about penalties, there's a certain typical template, but each one of them is discussed in details. Do you have unhappy clients? You want me to tell you that we have them? Yes, and give me the contacts. I can give you the contacts of happy clients or just clients and ask them, are they happy or not happy? Because we have our public press releases and we have other clients. Well, I would like to emphasize on the topic that the amount is not important, but the principle of motivation of the employees. The principle of service management inside of the company. If you would disclose yourself completely to us that we are a company providing security services, our internal processes are built in this and these rules. We are human relations management company. You sell services as a black box. No way, no way. We will come and solve your problems in forensics. Something like that. No, this black box has its own thresholds. We regularly come to the clients. We show them how our people work. We show them analytics. You can ask questions all the way to make a stress test to the first line on knowing the information security. And speaking about inconvenient situations for the employees, I had 2 cases when I was bringing a person from the client to my office. I was showing him a letter which said about penalizing a certain employee for a certain amount of money. And of course, it's understandable that there are gray zones. It's understandable that we'll not be ready to penalize every employee and to agree with every client who is being hired, etc., etc. But to show our processes, but to show what people are working for us and how they do it, and give you an opportunity to speak face to face with those people. Well, we regularly have those things with our clients. I have a reverse question. For which internal security incidents you have criminal prosecution in your company? Because you said it's a strange motivation. Example of criminal responsibility for internal incident. Well, what should he do? Should it lead to somebody's death or damage to health? Or what should happen to criminally prosecute the employees? Because criminal responsibility does not motivate my employees. Nobody has cancelled the law about commercial secret, and there is a commercial criminal responsibility. And in production facilities, PBC system, in the case of violation, can lead to the death of a person, and this is criminal responsibility. Okay, but how's it related to the level of services and to some downtime and to losses incurred? Well, commercial secret, it's a specific theft of information or theft of finances. Yes, for this there is a criminal responsibility, but for some downtime of certain services, somebody go to prison, well, it's very strange, especially if we're speaking about some specific PBC. Well, it shouldn't be done to external services. So if it's something bigger, something simpler, then perhaps we should speak about some specific services which are being outsourced. Well, let's move to the completion. Today we were speaking about services. as organizers, we didn't speak too much about ourselves. Yes. You wanted to ask something? Yes. My name is Andrei. I work in New York company Flashpoint. We closely work with many Fortune 500 companies, especially in financial industry, and right now we also work with motor industry, air companies, and I would like to share my experience, what we see among our clients, some methods they use. Truthfully, there is no silver bullet or a single product which will solve all the problems, cure all the diseases. We see that each one of our clients has internal team, and at the same time they have 5 to 10, sometimes 15 outside vendors. Each one of them is specialized in some niche. Afterwards, we see that clients themselves, especially if 2, 3 years ago they were very closed in showing confirmation with their competitors, counting that, well, you had a problem, well, it's your problem. But we are all in the same boat, and if it happens today with the same target, tomorrow Best Buy will be broken. So open channels of information exchange are being created, like non-profit organizations like NSFTA, Infotech, where from each company, big companies, they have one specialist in single office, and they can communicate with each other sitting shoulder to shoulder. They can exchange information, and this information is quickly delivered to the management ears inside of the company, and they also create informal channels of communications between security specialists, elementary email chats where they have 200, 300 specialists, and one company have received a phishing email. In the course of 5 minutes, they send email to everybody, and everybody knows that, well, hey guys, there's a problem, please watch carefully, pay attention. Then we see that the problem is of damage compensation can be solved by insurance companies only. It's a big problem. Recently, for example, there was one case that we've been working, and it was hacking of a biggest oncology centers network, diagnostical centers which help to oncological patients have stolen 2.5 million records. A person who done it somewhere in one of post-Soviet countries. He earned some money on it, from $500 to $1,000, but for the companies it cost billions of dollars. Investigation was done recently. How much does it cost the hacking of medical center and the loss of one record from that company? Well, $400. It's the cost of one record. Let's multiply it. It's $1 billion. The company basically went bankrupt. It had to go to IPO in January, but as soon as they have announced that they've been hacked, they removed their IPO application, and they wanted to collect $150 million. And in the process, they've lost billion, and I'm not sure they will stay in business at all. So such loss, no company can sustain. That's why we do communicate with NetLife, Off-Lake. They start thinking about how can we invent a product which can be sold to clients. How can we insure those risks? The problem is that in order to evaluate potential risk, these cases should happen. For example, with medical centers, this happens very often, and they know well. In the last 3 years, we lost so much money, and we can calculate it, we already can assess it, and we can make a certain quote for companies in other industries. It didn't happen yet, so it's a question of time. Well, I've said a lot of different things, but the main idea is that there is no single answer to this problem. Yes, companies have to actively cooperate between themselves, and they shouldn't only hope for vendors. Of course, you should do the in-source team of specialists, at least 1, 2, 3 people. You'll be surprised, but even in the biggest banks, they do have 5 to 10 people in a cyber team. These are banks which have turnovers of $100 billion. Everything else is being outsourced. That's it. Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you. It was very interesting. So the question of maturity is initial, and the question of a stage-by-stage approaching to forming of informational exchange and once again getting mature to outsourcing and using those services, and all the way to very clear leverages and risk management systems. If you won't have them, then this maturity will never come to existence. Okay, dear colleagues, you need it. My apology. Can I hear a comment about exchange of information between Kaspersky Lab on the international level? You're one of the leaders of global IT security market. So together with other vendors, do you cooperate with them to exchange? Well, so you said that you can give those bricks from which one can build a great wall. So in order to have those bricks more specialized, in order to be able to react to direct attacks in a faster pace, so that we wouldn't have such a long feedback. So for example, somewhere in the energy sector, there was attack in one country against one company, so that other companies in another country of the globe would be ready for similar attacks. Kaspersky Lab, do you have any work in this direction? Well, the answer to this question could be given by employees of a virus lab in Kaspersky. I'm not one of those. So in order not to make mistakes in my replies, what can I do? I'm ready to take your email and then connect you to proper employees of my company. But generally speaking, we do everything to distribute information, especially if it's lawfully distributed information. It's distributed by the whole community. If you will come to securelist.com, you will see a big number of reports which contain a lot of specific information about command control centers and botnets discovered by us, very specific OBTs with anatomy of their devices, with description of vulnerabilities being exploited by them, with geographical connection thereof. So everything which is lawful and legal, we openly distribute and share with the community. Okay, we have 10 minutes left to the end of the session. So let's speak about this agenda, and perhaps we'll draw a line, because we have a lot of colleagues on the stage and maybe they have something to say. So we, from our side, we can say that technological assumptions, as we can see them from the point of view of attracting external experts, they were available a long time ago, and right now they are increasing from year to year. These are questions of applying additional means of protecting the information, and it is very difficult to implement them as additional means of protection and pull them as on those employees who are already overloaded by this work. For example, those targeted acts. Of course, there are assumptions on qualification and resources. So questions related to limited resources, especially, criminals, they use them and understand if there is a repetitive wave of using so-called DDoS camouflage when certain people are being distracted from IT security departments and management and under coverage of this cloud. They make even more precise and more interesting attacks. So if there's no possibility to scale, I'm not speaking about cloud opportunities, but still more flexible capabilities of attracting those services. Therefore, capabilities of reaction to those attacks will be much smaller. There's also questions related to limit capabilities of products from the point of view of the speed of their upgrade and update to cover all possible vectors of attacks, to be able to note all of them. This is not just related to super tested systems. where they use very conservative solutions, but even to the most advanced systems related to OpenTel or people who work next to these technologies and generate those ideas and understand that today specifically where the first patient they already have, and they should look at other clients in the face, and this is something we've been speaking about, similar symptoms. This is closer to the services. And another question that I would like to give to my colleagues and hear the answers for them at the end of the discussion. I don't think that we'll make any breakthrough in this topic, but how do you see for yourself and for your organization, with the consideration of all the complexity with regulatory framework and with other limitations, what is the situation today from the point of view of using services, non-using these services, and what will happen in 3 years from now? What's going to be trends? So let's begin from the other side. From me? Yeah. We're expecting for MSSP as well. There are very few MSSPs in the market. Only one is working for all of them. MSSP, and they don't really, MSSPs are not going for this willingly, and taking your own product and selling it on a subscription basis and creating internal outsourcing service for this product, it's not a complex objective. At least they need to make one step towards MSSPs. And Ilya says that nobody does that yet, as of yet. Well, I will say that we do expect a second MSSP in our country when they will come. As a security specialist, I can say that we should trust people generally, and we should have tools to control them at the same time and search for them afterwards. But generally speaking, when MSSPs come to our market, this is assessment of the condition of the industry. Previously we had personal contracts. Right now, well, chicken or the egg, I don't know what was the first, but the more of those, the better relations we'll have. Personally, I do expect in the nearest future transfer of 100% monitoring functions and expertise and various solutions, especially in IT security issues, to be outsourced inside only the client service and those things which are playing important role in the infrastructure. And even there there will be so many precise things which should be outsourced. But generally speaking, we move in the right direction. Too unfortunate that it's too slow. I think that service-based model will develop, will grow. It will be highly demanded. However, well, I represent a bank and a financial organization. I do see a certain combined model using the internal competency center and outsourcing of those services, which can and economically feasible to be outsourced. That's basically what was said by my colleague from Flashpoint, and he shared these particular experiences. Naturally speaking, I hope that all these communities will develop formal and informal ones, with those which exist already, industrial and non-industrial, where this exchange of information is being done. Honestly speaking, we see that MSSP market today and cyber risk insurance market is just making first steps in our country. So in about 5 years, we'll meet once again and we'll discuss it once again when we'll see certain progress. From economical point of view, dear colleagues, outsourcing in information security is doomed to success. We cannot avoid it. We see more and more challenges. Technical measures should be higher and higher. We should have more people, but we don't have higher budgets. So outsourcing model, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, this is something that will come to. The main stumbling stone is the absence of competition in this market. And what happens when you use various service models, we don't have certain competencies inside of our team, and we should pull all the eggs into one basket, and we should play with one single outsourcer. Am I right? Unfortunately, yes, I'm right. So we're waiting for the development and seeing more players, and then all these fears and mistrust and unclear relations and responsibilities, they will leave with time. Honestly speaking, we're disappointed by the same points. We want to see more MSSPs. We want to see more companies who are trying to do some right things with the client. Dear colleagues, the model of fast devaluation of old assets allows us to get rid of those capital assets which are losing their value. And the model has the right to exist because we're getting rid of own systems, but everybody speaks about maturity of informational systems. And honestly speaking, we should mention the maturity of services being provided, and especially in order to buy this service as a service and not as some work on some single incidents. For this, models should grow and grow. And definitely I see for myself that these services, they have to be tested on a SMB level services, and until some good criteria will be developed, some criteria of assessing the damages and risking and ensuring those risks, especially risks which are related to information processing of third parties. After that, this topic will be developing, but right now it's in the infancy stage. Colleagues, I would like to say that information security services not just as challenges, but as change management, which cannot be done in the framework of information security service of one company. And for them, information security is not a main activity for the company. So from my side, we'll not be able to provide such level of monitoring of those changes as it can be provided by a specialized company, a service provider. And I see a hybrid model arising. Inside, we have a certain nucleus responsible for process organization, for decision making, and the center of communications inside of the organization, and all the routine operations and monitoring operations. And elementary services, first line, second line services are transferred to the outsourcing and outstaffing to MSPs. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Thanks to everybody who's been listening to us. It was very interesting to me, and I think, well, it was a long day. It comes to an end. We expect to see you tomorrow. There will be end of the CTF competition and other competitions. Please come to PhD, and thank you very much.